Hello, everyone. I am Northern Westman, and you're listening to The Disciple Hour, episode 20. I'm joined by Ian and Gentile Gentleman, and today's topics are number one, the deportation of the Romeike family from Germany. They live in the United States and they're threatened to be deported back to Germany. And second, another heretical quote by John Hagee, the Bible shyster we talked about last time on episode 19. And third, Israel attacks the West Bank. All right, gentlemen, would you like to introduce yourselves?
This is Ian.
Hey everyone, good morning. It's Gentile.
So the first topic, the Romeike family, they have lived in the United States for 15 years. They fled from Germany because they are not allowed to homeschool in Germany. It is forbidden. And they fled to the US, to some southern state, I believe. I think it was Tennessee. And there they homeschool their kids. They have a lot of children. It's a very wholesome white family. Their family pictures they are at the beach. It's like a white sand, very clear sky, beautiful ocean in the background, and they're dressed in like very light colored linen clothes, and they're all smiling, they're all happy. It's a very wholesome white Christian family with conservative values, Christian values. And it is so obvious that they are only being targeted by the anti-white regime because they are white. They have done nothing wrong. And it just shows that we live under an anti-white regime. There are illegal, let me just say, intruders in the United States who commit crimes and are still not deported. They are caught, but they are still not deported. We have such cases from the US. And then this family does nothing wrong and is being deported because, well, they can't really give a clear reason, but we all know it. It's because they're white. So, guys, what do you think about this case?
Yeah, I mean, that's really the biggest takeaway from it. I mean, when you look at what some of the most extreme anti-whites say, it seems like some of them are viscerally scared of, large white wholesome families because it just represents everything that they hate and represents everything that, I don't know whether it's genuine fear, whether it's just envy or what, but, this is the building block of Western civilization, which is something that anti-whites despise. So, when they see white people who aren't apologetic, who are firm in their beliefs and their convictions, and they build strength through the size of their family. I mean, a lot of people fear that, and if you want to work out from there, I mean, that's really shows why multiracial societies don't work, because people fear each other's numbers, and the fact that they're Christians, it just shows that the government could take care of these problems. They could take care of the immigration problems we have if they really wanted to. They could deport these people if they really wanted to, but instead of going after criminals, instead of going after malcontents, they go after good people who will follow the law and who will comply. If I mean, because that this family, at the end of the day, if they don't win any legal battles, if they don't successfully mount opposition to what's being done to them, they will eventually have no choice but to return to Germany, because they're moral people and they'll follow the law. But criminals, just by their very nature, are not law-abiding people, and border crossers by their nature are not law-abiding people. They're not, simply by entering illegally, they've already shown that they don't regard the borders of our country as sacred or as valid in any way. They just brazenly cross it without a second thought. So, and they'll even go so far as to demand that they have a right to be let into our country. So they've demonstrated by their very actions that they're not people who respect the law or who respect moral principles. So they don't even want to. The government just lets them get away with it because they don't care. They don't even want to. They don't care about keeping those people out because ultimately those people contribute to white erasure. They contribute to the general sense of hopelessness that many people in America have, and they're part of the decline. So you can see what the government's ultimate agenda is based on where they put their priorities.
Yeah, spot on.
Yeah, and the other thing that's a shame to see, is we have to put into context why they're being, put up for deportation. So the U.S. government has decided that they are worthy of deportation because their reason for moving to the United States, their stated reason, was that they were facing political oppression in Germany. They were unable to homeschool their children because in Germany that's not legal. And they didn't want their children going to public school because the public schools are very anti-Christian. And to put this in perspective for a lot of Americans, as bad as things are in America and as much of these things that we see, Europe is 10 or 15 years ahead of us. And they don't have the same protections that a lot of Americans have. Most countries in Europe don't allow homeschooling. You have to kind of do it illegally if you do it. And they also don't have protection on freedom of speech. A lot of Europeans use the phrase freedom of speech, and they demand it, but they don't have the kind of protections for it like we do in the US. So it is very, very different in Europe. And this family wanted to homeschool their kids. They didn't want them to go to a place where they were basically going to be torn away from their faith. They didn't want them bombarded with, perverted sexual promotion and all the other things that are promoted in a lot of these European public schools, especially in Germany at this time. And for that, they came to the US so that they could homeschool their kids and simply live, the way that they wanted to. This was their reason for coming here. And when you compare and contrast that to the vast majority of illegal migrants that come from South America, what's the number one reason they all give? Oh, well, we just want a job. They just want to work. We don't have enough money where we're from. It's all about money. So when illegal migrants come from South America and they say, "Oh, we want money," we have to let them in. That's a perfectly valid reason for coming here. But if your reason is no, no, we're Christian, we want to protect our kids, and America's a much more Christian nation than where we're from, and so we want to come here and live this way. No, that's not good enough. They'll deport you. And there is a completely anti-white standard that's being applied here. Another thing to keep in mind is that the overwhelming majority of the time when we see people who are of illegal migrant background getting arrested, they usually stay here in the United States. They don't get removed. So that's another thing to consider is that this family has done nothing wrong. They've never committed any crimes. They work jobs, they pay their taxes. They have nothing criminal against them at all. They're being deported simply because the government is saying their reason for being here isn't good enough. Whereas other groups of illegal migrants who didn't even file applications to get here, they're being convicted all across this country of crimes and they're not being sent back. In 2017 alone, their DUI convictions for illegal migrants was upwards of 90,000. Drug possession and drug trafficking, almost 80,000. Assaults, 50,000. Larceny, upwards of 30,000. General crimes and burglary, a combined total of over 30,000. And this is just in 2017. Source here is the Pew Research Center. They did a huge study on any time that, law enforcement encounters illegal, aliens, what convictions they're facing, and the deportation rate of these people is extremely small. So we have genuine criminals of illegal migrant background that are being allowed to stay here. But this family that followed the process did it legally and has a valid reason for wanting to come here. No, they've got to go because their reason just isn't good enough. And that's the perspective that our government has on our immigration. They basically punish you for coming here the right way, and they reward anyone who comes here the wrong way simply because of political clout. And it's quite sickening that the Romeike family is being treated this way. And it should be a message to all Christians and all people that this is how our immigration is. They don't want the best people. They want to let in criminals. They want to let in, non-whites who they know are going to be anti-white and who they know are going to vote a certain way. But if you're white and you're Christian and you're conservative and you're going to vote a different way, they don't want you here. And that's really what this is about.
Yep.
I think it's kind of ironic in a way that America, not even 20 years ago, used to talk about freedom all the time. And you still hear a lot of, old-timey conservatives talk about how America is great because of its freedom. And, after 9/11, there are all these things like, well, they just hate us because of our freedoms. And yet, people who actually come to the U.S. searching for genuine freedom, they're not given it. So it's almost like we're in this weird time period where this old meme, which used to somewhat exist and used to somewhat be true, is really not true at all. And yet people are still stuck in that mindset, and a lot of people still believe the meme, if you will. But I've talked about this before, how people always used to say, hey, it's a free country, just if somebody wanted to do something. But that idea has slowly declined as I've gotten older. I've noticed people no longer say, hey, it's a free country anymore, because I feel like we've all been conditioned in a way to not value freedom, or to be scared of freedom even. The idea that, and by freedom I just mean the ability to speak our minds, the ability to act upon our consciences, the ability to not be under heavy government control. It's like each subsequent generation sees less and less freedom, and they're conditioned to accept less and less freedom. And it's kind of strange how the values it once espoused just don't seem to exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's definitely a redefining, of freedom. And it's an interesting point because anti-whites really have found a way to get around the Constitution. I mean, not only are they attacking the Constitution on the legal level, of course, they want to, get rid of the Second Amendment and do the things that we know about. But what they've basically created is an army of useful idiots that socially enforce the curbing of freedom. And the Constitution doesn't cover that, right? Like if all your coworkers, file HR complaints about you, that's not the government oppressing you, it's regular people. It's a company. So the Constitution doesn't protect you from that. What they've created is basically a giant tattletale scheme where anytime you think something that is socially unpaw or not anti-white enough, that they can basically use other channels to silence you or to punish you for thinking or speaking that way. Um, Really, unless you're standing on a street corner, you're not protected at all. You say the wrong thing at work, you can lose your job. You say the wrong thing at school, they can throw you out of school. Really, only in your own home and on a random street corner where you're not around anyone you work with, can you ever actually speak your mind? Anywhere else, in the country where you are, you have to censor yourself, and it's socially enforced. And these companies are firing people and punishing people, and these schools are punishing people all based on political motivation. It's not even like, oh, this guy can't do his job, or he's not, supporting the team, or he's falling behind. It's none of that stuff. It's like, oh, well, he works here, but we don't like what he thinks, and so we're going to fire him. It's insane that they have created this environment where it's okay to basically enforce this social oppression versus a government oppression, and it is pretty incredible.
Yeah, yeah. What they've done is over decades is, they have enforced the anti-white narrative, and they have created this false moral high ground where anti-whiteism is moral, and any heresy to anti-whiteism is seen as immoral. And like you said, they get people to A, police themselves, and B, they get the useful idiots who are conditioned from birth to ostracize and socially lynch anyone who is heretical to anti-whiteism. And yeah, I mean, the founding fathers, they could not have imagined what we are facing today. Uh, with all due respect to the founding fathers of America, I think they were all great men, but they could not have possibly have imagined this case. But our fight then is our fight really reduces down to morality. We have to break this spell casting of anti-whiteism. Like we have to show and tell people that anti-whiteism is immoral. It's evil. And when enough white people understand that, we will recapture our destiny as a people, will become a nation again. Well, again, I would say, to begin with, I mean, we've never seen ourselves as one people in many countries. But what we're seeing in this Romeike case, it's very interesting, is that many white people are coming to their defense. And that's very encouraging. We're seeing the formation of a people coming to the defense of this family, because our people are genetically more prone to individualism. It has its benefits, and it's also a curse. In a world of collectives, individualism is suicide. But finally, we're seeing people coming to the Romeike's defense, and that is beautiful to see. It's very encouraging. Any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I was going to say that actually is a really good point. They've appealed the case, and so they have not been deported yet. They're still on the chopping block, but they at least get a chance to plead their case. And tens of thousands of people have donated to their legal fund, to support them. And I've seen multiple petitions being put out there. So if they do get to stay, it will be because tens of thousands of other Christians, other
Mhm.
white people are standing up for them. And, that's encouragement for us that this does work when we
Yeah.
all band together and we all try to enforce some kind of change or support some particular family or person, that we can make a difference. The black pill is tempting to take, but we do have to know that we can see some success when we do these things. And before we hop to the next topic, I guess the last thing I'll say on it is that, the final thing to really remember about this family and about us, is, oh goodness. Oh, I'm so embarrassed. I had a thought because you said something and I was going to say something about it, and now I'm blanking on what you said.
Hmm. Recapturing our destiny?
It was something just before that. Oh, forgive me. I'm horrible. If I remember, I'll bring it back up.
I did mention that our people are individualistic, but it can be a blessing and a curse.
Oh, that's right. What I was going to say of as the last little topic here, just so people understand, because I can already hear some people in the comments or detractors saying, "Oh, well, that's because you don't have freedom when you're at your job and you're not supposed to have freedom of speech there." People who say that kind of nonsense when people do get in trouble at work for having the wrong opinions. Everyone across this nation can admit that when you spout off the right politics at work, you never get in trouble. Everyone has heard the homosexual at work talking about being homosexual and pride and all this nonsense. That person will never get in trouble for constantly talking about how gay they are. But anyone else who doesn't spout off the proper politics are the ones who get in trouble. So it's not even like politics aren't allowed in the workplace. Politics are encouraged in the workplace as long as you spout off the right ones. There was even a case at a company where some employee wrote something about BLM on every single whiteboard in the company. Like it was pro BLM, like, oh yeah, like BLM this, BLM that. Every single solitary meeting room had a BLM drawing on it in support of BLM. And then another employee, when they were using one of the rooms, erased it. And then some other employees, when they went to go use some of these other meeting rooms, they were erasing it. And so it was this big scandal, and they were trying to figure out who erased them because they thought they were being anti-BLM, when really they just wanted to use the whiteboard in that meeting room. And so the problem wasn't that this person went into every single solitary room and wrote BLM everywhere, because no one cares if you're offended by that. The problem was that someone had the audacity to erase a BLM thing. So politics is very much encouraged everywhere you go, as long as you're promoting the right ones. So for the people who say that nonsense, oh, you don't have freedom of speech at work. No, no, no. Only certain people have freedom of speech at work, and only certain people don't. And that would be the last thing that I would say on that topic.
All right. Is there anything else on the Romeikes, or should we go to John Hagee?
Just keep them in our prayers.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, very.
And pray for our people that we become a nation. That's my prayer.
One nation
Anyway.
with many.
Are you going to say, Ian?
Do you want me to talk about Hagee?
No, you said something.
Oh, I just
before.
said one people with many countries, or one people with many nations, or something. That's the idea we should be shooting for.
Yes. All right, then. Want to go to Hagee?
Yeah, let's revisit Mr. Hagee. He's going to be like our new favorite guy.
Yeah. So apparently Hagee, for those who don't know, if you heard our last episode about Bible shysters, we spent some time on this speech he was giving, basically saying that the Jews are God's chosen people and essentially catering to them. There's a very infamous quote from John Hagee that dates all the way back to 1988, and it seems as though he has not in any way renounced it. He gave an interview with the Houston Chronicle, and here's what he said. He said, "I believe that every Jewish person who lives in the light of the Torah, which is the word of God, has a relationship with God and will come to redemption. In fact, trying to convert Jews is a waste of time. The Jewish person who has his roots in Judaism is not going to convert to Christianity. There is no form of Christian evangelism that has failed so miserably as evangelizing the Jewish people. They already have a faith structure. Everyone else, whether Buddhist or Baha'i, needs to believe in Jesus, but not Jews. Jews already have a covenant with God that has never been replaced by Christianity." So that's obviously, if you truly believe in Christ, and if you truly believe in the Bible, you know that's just patently false, because what's the verse we always hear where Jesus said, "I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father except through me." And he never said that, the Pharisees, who are the forebears of modern Judaism, got a pass on this because they were following the law. No, he didn't say that. I mean, in fact, the Pharisees were they're probably the group that experienced most of Jesus' vitriol, because he saw how they were misleading people, and they were forcing people to think legalistically, and being outwardly pious but inwardly evil. And he condemned them probably the most harshly of anybody in the New Testament, in the Gospels. But somehow you have shysters like Hagee who think that those people who were following the Pharisees they had it right, and that they're exempt from Jesus' requirements, that they have a special status, and that's simply heretical. That's not in line with any Orthodox Christian teaching. So, and it's kind of funny how I'm actually reading this article that outlines a lot of the problems with John Hagee, and another thing it says about him, interestingly enough, is he's a big promoter of the prosperity gospel. And for anyone who's never heard of the prosperity gospel, that's essentially the idea that, well, God wants us all to be rich. God wants us all to enjoy the finer things in life, and he wants us all to be spending money on fancy clothes and cars and houses and stuff.
Wow.
The kind of thing that a lot of televangelist types do. They rake in all this money and they spend it on themselves rather than living a life of humility.
Mm-hmm.
And so perhaps it's not surprising that somebody who's after money would be promoting a cause that didn't directly benefit him. I won't say too much about that because the ear is against the door, but I mean, if you can connect the dots between those two things, maybe you can see why this his whole quote unquote ministry may be a bit corrupt.
Yeah, I mean, I said it the last time, I'll say it again. He is serving the church of Mammon. It's the church of money. And in my opinion, it's my opinion, but I think you all agree that every single quote unquote mega church is really a for-profit church, a Mammon church. And yeah, he's after money, and yeah, the ear is against the door, but if you serve these people, then they will reward you financially. But I want to read to you all from Romans 9:27. Esaias also crieth concerning Israel, though the number of the children of Israel be as the sand of the sea, a remnant shall be saved. This is in direct opposition to what Hagee claimed about, being saved on the basis of your birth as a jaywalker. But yeah, I mean, you also mentioned the Pharisees. Are they in heaven? Will they inherit God's kingdom? I sincerely doubt it. But yeah, this guy, he's a shyster, a Bible shyster.
To be perfectly honest, there's really only two options. He's either intentionally lying or he's never actually read the Bible. To say that Christianity never replaced, the original covenant is silly. Jesus himself said that's exactly what he did. And Paul in his later books, he says, like, yeah, Christ came first to the Jews and then to the Gentiles, to the rest of the descendants of Israel and all the other people of the earth. Like the very first people that were, that Christ himself tried to evangelize and tried to convert were the Jews. So to say that, like, no, the Jews are good, they're totally fine, they don't need Christianity at all, like that's totally not important. It's like you're that's all Jesus did. That was his entire purpose. He knew that the apostles were going to minister to everyone else. you know Christ himself, his job was to preach to the Pharisees and to start at the heart of the Holy Land. So he's basically just denying all of Christ's work, which is pretty insane. So, like I said, he's either never read a Bible, which I doubt. Even in all of his years of preaching immorality, I'm sure he's at least accidentally read enough of it to know that that's not true. So he is intentionally lying. He's intentionally lying,
Yeah.
and just like Ian said, a lot of these ministers, these big televangelists, or these big churches that are now allowing like gay, tranny, ministers and lady, you know, preachers and all this stuff, they know they're lying. They know that that's not allowed, but they don't
Mhm.
truly believe in God. This is how you can tell they don't truly believe in God. They're just preaching it because they're getting donations, guys. These people are fake. If they truly believed in God and they truly believed he was going to judge people based on what he said, and that people were truly going to receive, the fruits of their life, in judgment, they wouldn't be allowing and doing these things. They don't truly believe in God. They think it's just a cuddle feel-good bedtime story, like a security blankie that they're offering you in exchange for money, but that the world probably really is just a ball flying through space, and that we all evolved from pond scum and monkeys. Like they don't believe in God at all, and you can tell by their behavior. Anyone who truly believes in God and actually fears, you know, facing any kind of repercussions for their life would not preach and would not act the way these people do. They are not believers.
Yeah,
Every
amen.
time I yeah, every time I think of uh Jesus calling out the Pharisees, I always think of Matthew chapter 23. If people who enjoy a good rant would always love that. That's not to reduce it to a rant, the words of Jesus Christ. But I mean, if you're entertained by people, going on giving really harsh speeches, then this is a good chapter. And there are some verses in here which are very good. And for example, Matthew 23, verse 12, this is the NIV. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. And he goes on to say in further verses right after that, in verse 13, he says, Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You yourselves do not enter, nor will you let those who enter who are trying to. And in verse 15, he says, Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You travel over land and sea to win a single convert, and when you have succeeded, you make him twice as much a child of hell as you are. So, I mean, Jesus wasn't saying that these guys had a special dispensation where they don't have to follow him. He was pretty he didn't mince words with them.
Yeah, I'm reading it here as well.
Yeah, that is another funny thing. Another real easy way to tell if someone understands the Bible or not is when you hear these preachers who are just like, "Oh no, I mean, Jesus was just all about love." And if you don't just say that everyone's awesome and everyone's good and everyone's great and that you love them, you don't really understand Jesus. And it's like, "No, no, no. Jesus loved you, and so he told you harsh truths in an attempt to wake you up and turn you from your wicked ways. He didn't just tell everyone that they were fine just the way they were. He was a
Mhm.
very harsh critic. And he did it in love, in the sense that, like, no, I want you to be better. I want you to come to the Father. But if you
Mhm.
continue the way you are, you're nothing more than a satanic, little speck of a human. He was very, very honest. And that is the most loving thing you can do. A lot of these preachers who are just, they just use the word love, inconspicuously to refer to anything and everything biblical. Again, they're lying to you. They don't understand Jesus. It's like being a parent. If you're a parent and you have a child that acts up, but all you ever do is reward them and you never punish them and you never tell them, like, hey, you kind of have a bad attitude, you need to shape up. Like, people aren't going to want to work with you or want to be your friend if you're going to act that way. If you never say things like that to your children, they will grow up to be monstrous people. That's not loving your children, that's being a bad parent. So this idea that Christ was all about love, yes, he was all about love. But if you don't understand what real love is, then you're never going to understand Jesus. Jesus was not just about everything's honky dory and you just keep doing what you're doing and life is good. Jesus was like, no, don't be a bad person. And if you're going to be a bad person, I'm going to nag you about it until you're a good person because I love you. And that's a perspective that we all have to keep. That's a real easy way to tell if your minister understands God or not, how they use the word love.
Yeah.
Why Jesus doesn't judge people?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
good
right.
Jesus.
He literally calls people a den of vipers, but no, no judgment, no judgment whatsoever.
Yeah.
I was going to say, it's somewhere in the Proverbs, it says, and I'm paraphrasing, whoever does not chastise his son, he hates his son. And Jesus knew that. I mean, if there is hell, which I believe there is, and you don't chastise people and they'll end up going to hell, did you really love them? No, I mean, if you love them, you would warn them, you would chastise them. Ultimately, it's their choice, but you have to chastise them. If they don't see how they're, violating the law, or living in sin, right? Then you have to chastise them. But yeah, a very good point you made, Gentile.
Yeah, they conflate love with spoiling. They think love means giving someone whatever they want. And anyone
Yeah.
who's ever even tried to have a relationship knows that doesn't work. That's not love.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, John Hagee, guys. We'll keep bringing up Bible shysters as the weeks go by because we're actually getting a lot of fun stuff out of their quotes. What these people say is quite comical.
It's very interesting. This whole Israel and Hamas thing has really been a mask-off moment for many Bible shysters. In my anger, I unsubscribed from a lot of Christian YouTubers. Basically, everyone who idolized the jaywalkers and commit jaywalker worship, they are Bible shysters. I mean, seriously. Yeah,
Yeah,
I might make a list and we might go over it next time. Would be interesting. But I think
yeah.
I've said everything I wanted to say about John Hagee, but go ahead.
No, yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, if we come up with a list of people to continue to take down, I like it. Yeah, the last thing I'll add is, actually, I saw a really great tweet the other day. Klaus Arminius. I'm not going to say I sign off on every single thing he posts, just like he wouldn't sign off on every single thing that I post. But he had a really great comment on one of these people who's coming out saying, "Oh, if you're a Christian, you have to support Israel." And his comment was, why would I listen to someone who rejects Christ, hates Christians, and just cherry picks a few verses from a part of the Bible they don't believe in to get me to support their war? And I was like, that right there is crystal clear, perfect. That's the attitude every Christian should have. Why are we listening to people who don't even believe in the portion of the Bible that they're cherry picking and quoting from, who reject Christ and who don't like Christians? Why would you listen to their advice? And so that'll be the last thought I suppose I leave everyone with because it was very well said.
Indeed.
All right, so I guess that brings us to Middle East updates before we close everything out. Few interesting things going on in the Judean Philistine conflict, and the most interesting thing that happened about 6-7 days ago, Israel actually bombed some sites in the West Bank. The West Bank has not attacked Israel, and no rockets or any kind of attacks or aggression have come out of the West Bank. But Israel still decided to blow up a bunch of targets across the West Bank as part of its next step in its conflict with Gaza. Um, and and so that was pretty interesting. They're escalating the conflict into more areas and regions instead of just containing it to Gaza. And they claim that they're Hamas targets, like they claim that everything's a Hamas target. I'm sure the Greek Orthodox Church they're going to claim was a Hamas target as well that they blew up 2 weeks ago. And so that's interesting that they've drawn the West Bank now into this open conflict and they've opened up a war on two fronts versus maintaining it to one front. You would think that wouldn't be the wisest thing to do, but that's what's happening there. And then another interesting thing, there aren't too many updates. It's more just the same, and we're kind of going around in circles with this whole incident until it ends. But a new perspective I kind of wanted to put onto it, and just a thought is we all know that a lot of these NGOs that are helping mass migrants cross the Mediterranean or cross over countries and get them into Europe, whether it's through Turkey or any other gateway, a lot of these NGOs are run by a very specific group of people, and they're funded actually by a specific nation. They even have on their vests, and stuff, the symbols and the names, and you can tell who these people are. And the other interesting thing is that a lot of the places that these refugees are coming from are places that are part of what's called Greater Israel or Greater Judea, I suppose we can call it. For people who don't know what Greater Israel is, Greater Israel is when you go back and look at the Bible and you look at the land that was promised to Abraham. Abraham was basically promised all the land from the Nile basin, where the Nile River is fertile, and where ancient Egypt, built their pyramids and such. The Sinai Peninsula, which is basically that entire peninsula near the Red Sea, all the way to the Euphrates. This includes portions of Iraq, Syria, Yemen, obviously Egypt, all of, where the Palestinians are, the West Bank and Gaza, and a couple of other countries in this area. And the overwhelming majority of the conflicts in the Middle East that have been happening over the last few decades, and the places where the overwhelming majority of a lot of these illegal migrants into Europe are coming from, with the exception of Pakistan, like Syria and Iraq, all occupy land that's part of what Judeans would call Greater Israel. And Greater Israel is still a goal of the government of Judea. It's something they do want to achieve.
That's very
So it's
interesting.
interesting that massive numbers of these people are not only being displaced from these land masses by wars that are being waged by the United States, and obviously other countries that are helping to do it. And then NGOs that are being funded by a particular nation are helping to move these people out of this land to depopulate it. And that would make it much easier to conquer, to take, and to occupy in the future. And I don't think it's unrelated. And I suppose I'll just leave everyone with that thought as we continue to consider a lot of the things that are happening in the Middle East.
That's very interesting, and yeah, I have heard about that project. You said Yemen. I think you meant Jordan.
Yes, you're right, Jordan. I
Yeah.
apologize, Jordan.
Yep. Yeah, it is
And
interesting that.
as it stands right now, too, there's actually multiple countries that are still at war with Israel. Now, we don't talk about it very much because they've kind of been cold wars, but Lebanon, Iraq, and Syria are all still technically at war with Israel. There isn't really anything going on in these conflicts, but all of them are still technically declared as at war with Israel at this time because of past conflicts and things that have happened before.
Well,
Have you heard about Greater Israel at all, Ian?
I'm not very familiar with it, but I can understand it. It makes sense. I guess my thought is, I wonder what, if they ever achieve that, what they would do next.
Yeah, very interesting. And have you guys ever read the book by Herzl?
About Zionism?
no.
Yeah, he's basically one of the forefathers of Zionist thought and Zionist objectives.
I've not actually read the book, but I'm familiar with him. Have you actually
Yeah,
read the book?
yeah, Theodor Herzl. He wrote a book called The Jewish State. I do own this book. I've read it. And it is pretty intense. I would actually suggest that everyone read it because a lot of the justifications and claims that he uses in the book for the existence of a Jewish state actually support the existence for our own states. And it's a really great way to gain some perspective on calling people out on their hypocrisy, and the anti-white double standard. It'll give you a very good lease on it. But the other thing to remember is this guy, at least conceptually, he's pretty much started and created the Zionist movement. For lack of a better term, and using, people that have probably been commented on way too much, it would be like what Mussolini was to Italian fascism and what, Hitler was to German fascism. He was the thought leader. He was at the forefront. Everyone listened to him and everyone took his writings, and they were the blueprint for what eventually came to be as the state of Israel. And in his book, he does go into detail that the ultimate goal is to obtain Greater Israel. And even if you don't read the book, just knowing that kind of tells you that Zionism is a a long game plan that they know is going to take hundreds and hundreds of years. And that game plan is incrementally, so far, been followed, just as it's laid out in the book. I don't think they purposely talk about him too much, but if you follow a lot of the political movements, within Israel, they follow the game plan that's laid out in his book pretty closely. So it would only make sense that their future plans are to continue to follow a lot of the things that he laid down.
You might know this better than I do, Gentile, but from what I've heard about Herzl, he wasn't exactly as two-faced as some of these modern day Zionists are, who say, like, nationalism for me, but not for thee. Like, he actually kind of understood that, we don't get along, we shouldn't live alongside each other. So that was his justification for wanting to create a Jewish state. I mean, but, like, do you think he was hypocritical, or was he more fair-minded than perhaps some of today's people in the movement today are?
To be completely honest, I agree with you. I would categorize him along with Malcolm X. And Malcolm X is actually one of the very few people from the civil rights era that I respect, because Malcolm X's entire, argument was, yeah, no, white people and black people shouldn't be forced to live together. Like, that's insane. Black people should, create a country or, a state or whatever of their own, and we should go live there, and we should be separate, and everyone will be happier for it. And Malcolm X is actually, he didn't like white people, and he's obviously anti-white, but I can at least respect the fact that he's honest and that he views the situation just the way that we do, and he's completely fair about it. And he says, yeah, no, we should just have a place of our own, and no one should bother us, and then white people have a place of their own and nobody bothers them, and that's the end of it. And Herzl, yeah, he was very much in that category as well, where, yeah, he justified, the creation of the Jewish state. Like, yeah, no, all Jews should be in Israel. Jews should be nowhere else but there. And that's just where we should be, and people should leave us alone, and we should leave everyone else alone. So you're right. And that's why I think, he's kind of fallen from the vocabulary, just like Malcolm X has fallen from the vocabulary of the civil rights movement. No one talks about Malcolm X anymore. People talk about Al Sharpton, they talk about, Martin Luther King and all this stuff, but that's because they, preached like, oh yeah, no, white people and black people, they have to live together. We have to make this happen. Whereas Malcolm X was like, no, that's ridiculous. Why would we do that? And so he's kind of fallen out of favor, in history, in large part because that's not the message that, anti-whites want to push. They can't harm us if they leave us alone. So they don't promote him. And similarly, yeah, those portions of Herzl's beliefs I don't think are promoted for that reason.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, same way how among, like, black nationalist types, you don't hear much about Booker T. Washington or Marcus Garvey these days, although they kind of had a vision of, blacks building themselves up through hard work and education and stuff like that. But, nowadays the whole game plan is just, handouts, and how can we get more out of the government, and how can we milk the situation to our advantage more than how can we actually, work our way into prosperity.
Well, yeah, because again, those voices, they're not necessarily anti-white. They don't cause white victimization and white harm. They cause, peaceful separation where groups of people respect each other's space and they completely operate independently of each other. And that's not going to cause, the destruction of the West. And so it's not promoted. And anyone who brings them up, they just kind of don't talk about them. So yeah, it always comes back to anti-whiteism and anti-Christianity, really. Why certain people are promoted over others, even though those people might have an actual better plan, that would work better than those people.
Mm-hmm.
And to be fair, anyone who's listening here, we're not bashing on any particular groups. Like I said, I can find good things in what Herzl wrote. All I'm saying is that he laid down a blueprint, and it's good to know what that blueprint is because it can really give you an insight on what's happening in the Middle East. And same thing with Malcolm X. I can find a lot of good things that he said. He's anti-white. He didn't like white people, so it's not like me and him would have been friends. But we can all at least find common ground, and say that, look, there are plenty of people who saw the world the way that we do, who were not, within our sphere. And those are the kind of people that we have to talk about because that's an actual solution. that benefits everyone. It's not a solution that's anti-white. And that's why we bring it up. So just for people who are listening, if you're getting a little lost in the conversation, that's all we're trying to drive home here.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway,
Did you guys
that
want
was
to wrap up on the happy note?
yes, please.
All right, wrapping up on the happy note. So for everybody, we decided to kind of talk about something that's good, a feel-good moment to finish off this episode, and it's something that I showed my wife because someone posted about it the other day, and I kind of stumbled across it, and I decided to read it on a website called imom.com. It's the letter IMOM.com. They had this study. It's specific to the United States, but it is a pretty good study with a large sample size, and they found some pretty good statistics about marriage. And marriage is obviously something that we promote here. It's having families and making children, is not only something that God created for us and calls for us to do, but as white people, we definitely need to get better on this. We have to stop being selfish and have families. And here's some really good, uplifting statistics. So in the United States, 50% of first marriages will end in divorce. So you have a flip of a coin of getting divorced the first time you marry. And on the surface, that looks very bleak, and sad. What looks even worse is that second marriages, 72% of the time, end in divorce. So when you try again, you actually have worse odds than you do the first time around. But further in the study, so what they basically say is if you're going to get married, you've got to make the first time count because your chances of staying together get worse as time goes on. But the group that is least likely to get divorced is couples that pray together, have a less than 1% chance of divorce. They're 99.2% likely to stay married. So if you are a Christian and you pray with your spouse, even just at meal times, even if you just come together and make, praying and sharing values a small point of your day, your chances of staying married are almost guaranteed. And that's a very uplifting, and happy statistic for us Christians. So for any young men out there that are listening to us, that are being influenced by us, just know that what we're talking about here, this isn't all just political. This isn't all just pointing out other people's faults. No, there is concrete goodness to the way God asks us to live. He asked us to live this way for a reason. Because when you follow his word, when you live the right way, when you make God a member of your family and some piece of your relationships are going to last. And there's going to be more love in them. You will have better children. You will be a stronger, harder working, more physically fit man when you truly try to live up to this standard. And so we aren't here just to comment on the current thing. We're also here to tell you that you will live a better life. If you take these things seriously and you make prayer and God and Jesus Christ a part of your life. And I'll throw it back to the rest of you guys to throw your 2 cents in.
That's just so wholesome, and I was happy to hear it. It's a happy note.
Yeah. Yeah, man, I don't know if you want to go on about that one too much, but I mean, I have heard that really the statistic about 50% of marriages ending in divorce are mostly propped up by people who get married the second or third time, because a lot of those marriages end up poorly. So usually people who stay married have the best marriages. And well, I mean, that's kind of tautological, almost tautological. But the people who really invest in their first marriage, let's just say, those are the ones that last. So it's not as people make it sound.
I will just say on a final note, if you follow the peace of the Holy Spirit, you will be happy. So, I could go on about this. I might do it later. It's a good topic for another episode, but you can feel the peace in the Holy Spirit. I think many families, they break down, they split because there is no peace at their home. They're fighting, they're arguing, and often these are just petty things that are totally irrelevant. But if you chase the peace at all times, have a peace roundabout, then you will be happy and you will have a strong family. But that's all I wanted to say.
Well, yeah, and unfortunately, the overwhelming majority of those fights and reasons for first-time divorce are money. It's people arguing about money, and that's disheartening, But that really that really opens up. So, I mentioned something about men, right? Men, don't be afraid to get married. As long as you're a religious man, you find a religious woman, and you pray with your wife every day, you're gonna have good results. And so let's just talk about both men and women, and then women individualistically. Both men and women, arguing about money is what's going to get you. So make sure when you enter a marriage, you're entering it and you're going to be perfectly happy with just normal living standard. Yeah, one day you're going to share a home, and you're going to have a family car, maybe an extra one if you're really lucky, but just accept, that money and arguing about money is what's going to kill you. Men, spend your money responsibly. Put your family first. Women, you know, really let go of the fact that you need a closet full of clothes. You don't. And you don't need a new closet full of clothes every year. Those are the kinds of behaviors that will just wreak havoc on marriages, because people will they argue about money. So don't do it. And particularly for women, there was another study that came out. I know it's been quoted to death and a lot of people have talked about it, but the more men that you have sex with before you get married, the higher likelihood you're going to get a divorce. And it increases per man by a factor of 10, to the point where if you've slept with over 10 men before you marry your first time, you're almost guaranteed a divorce. So don't do it to yourselves. And this isn't an open thing where men get to have sex with as many people as they want. Don't do that, guys. Sleep with as few or no women before you get married is the biblical way. But for women especially, if you want to guarantee that your first marriage lasts, don't have sex with a bunch of men before you get married, because that's really what's going to cause problems for you emotionally in your marriage. And especially, I feel like the people we're going to reach are the people who value statistics and they value the numbers. People on our side love to talk about stats and we love to talk about numbers. So use the stats and use the numbers. Let everyone else's failed marriages strengthen your marriage. Don't make their same mistakes. Don't sleep with too many people before you get married, and don't fight about money. And make sure that you pray every day and that you are religious, and your marriage will do well. I suppose final thoughts that I'll leave on that really is just there's one choice in a man and a woman's life that is the most important choice of their life. For men, it's what is your trade? Not only is it to be religious and to submit yourself to God and to follow Christ, but what is your trade? A man needs to pick his career so that he can provide security and comfort for his family. And a woman, the most important choice in her life is the man she's going to marry. So you have to find a man who has secured a trade and who submits himself to God and follows Christ, and don't have sex with people before you get married, and you're going to have happy marriages. Those are the big decisions that men and women have in their lives. Men need to be able to provide that security and have a trade that they're secure in, and women have to make sure they don't sleep around and they pick the right man, and life is going to be good for you.
Amen. Yep. And we will just close it here. This has been an interesting discussion, and thank you all for listening. And thank you, gentlemen, for being here. And God bless you all, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, and God bless.
Yeah, God bless everyone. And remember, please like and share the videos, spread this around to your friends. We greatly appreciate it. The more this podcast can grow and the more people listen to it, we could potentially have guests and other things on in the future that can make this a lot more fun for everybody. And we do appreciate everyone's support. Thank you all very much.